Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Psalms in Hebrew and Comparative Translations. This morning we are going to learn Psalm 56 together. Like some of the most recent Psalms that we've looked at, Psalm 56 is not widely quoted in the Jewish liturgical tradition. It does have some really beautiful lines, and I think the sense of "in God we trust" is fairly well known in the United States, at least, since it's on our money. I don't know whether the quote "on our money" comes from this psalm or from other similar phrases
Wow.
in other psalms, but it definitely is present in this psalm. I didn't do any research about where
Yeah.
the phrase "in God we trust" on our money comes from. But "in God we trust" does come up in this psalm. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was a quote directly from here.
Hmm.
And so we'll talk about this psalm and its meaning and what emotional experience or spiritual experience we have when encountering this psalm. And we'll talk about if we were going to use this psalm as a prayer in our own spiritual life. What emotional state might we be in when we wanted to pray using this psalm? What is the reason why we would rely on this psalm as a place for our spiritual life? And like usual, we'll start with reading the psalm in Hebrew and then in English translation, and we'll start from there. Before we do, I do want to uh I do want to start with a logistical note, which is that basically starting this week, we're going to be about every other week for the next several weeks. And
Hmm.
that's not because I planned for every other week. It's because there's a conflict every other week. And, but I think it's important for us to keep meeting. So instead of canceling the whole section, we're going to meet every other week, which
Great.
is harder to keep track of, but put it on your calendar. So next Tuesday, I'm out of town at a conference. That's the 6th of July, and we will not meet. But we will meet the following Tuesday on the 13th. The Tuesday after that, the 20th of May, I'm taking a personal day well, it's my wife's birthday, so I'm gonna hang out with her. And so we won't be meeting that day. That's the 20th, but we will meet the 27th. So plan on the 13th and the 27th of May. Similarly, in June, the 3rd is Yom Tov Shavuot, the celebration of receiving the Torah at Sinai, and we will not be meeting on Yom Tov. So the 3rd, we will not meet, but we will meet on the 10th. And um, I am taking the 17th off because my wife Rachel is going out of town and we don't have childcare for our 2-year-old on Tuesdays. That is to say, my wife is the childcare for our 2-year-old on Tuesdays. Um, he goes to school on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but he's off on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that week, I'm taking Tuesday off to be the childcare for my child. That's also a personal day. Um, on the
Will
7th.
you be putting this in like a little
It's in the email. I
email?
send
Okay,
an
great.
email, yeah.
Okay, great.
The 24th, I'm just not sure if I'm available yet, but if the pattern holds, I will be available on the 24th. So hopefully that will work out. It might be that I am available, but not exactly at noon, and so we might need to slightly shift the time. But that's the plan. In July, I'm off on July 1st to go visit my grandmother. But then I should be available every other Tuesday of July. So we'll have 4 weeks in a row, July 8th through 29th, assuming that I stay ahead of the preparation for the class. So hopefully that will go well. All right. With that, let's read Psalm 56. למנצח על יונת אלם רחוקים, לדוד מכתם, באחוז אותו פלישתים, בגת. חונני אלוהים, כי שאפני אנוש, כל היום לוחם ילחצני, שאפו שוררי כל היום, כי רבים לוחמים לי מרום. יום אירא, אני אליך אבטח, באלוהים אהלל דברו, באלוהים בטחתי, לא יירא, מה יעשה בשר לי. כל היום דברי יעצבו, עלי כל מחשבותם לרע. יגורו יצפונו המה, עקבי ישמורו, כאשר קיוו נפשי. על אבן פלט למו, באף עמים הורד אלוהים. נודי ספרת אתה, שימה דמעתי בנודיך, הלא בספרתך. אז ישובו אויבי אחור, ביום אקרא זה ידעתי כי אלוהים לי. באלוהים אהלל דבר, באדוני אהלל דבר. באלוהים בטחתי לא יירא, מה יעשה אדם לי? עלי אלוהים נדריך, אשלם תודות לך, כי הצלת נפשי ממוות, הלא רגלי מדחי, להתהלך לפני אלוהים באור החיים. For the chief musician on Yonat Elim Rechokim. A psalm of David, a michtam, when the Philistines seized him in Gat. Have mercy on me, God, for men trample me underfoot. All day long assailants harass me. My foes trample me all day long, for many are those who assail me, O Most High. On the day of my great fear, I put my trust in you. In God, whose word I praise, in God I trust, I shall not fear. What can mortal man do to me? All day long they distort my words. All their thought is to harm me. They band together, they lie in wait. They watch my steps, eager to take my life. For such crimes are they to go unpunished? God, in your anger, cast down such people. Do keep count of my wanderings. Store my tears in your flask. Surely they are recorded in your book. Then my enemies will turn back when I call for help. For this I know that God is on my side. In God whose word I praise, in the Lord whose word I praise, in God I trust, I shall not fear. What can man do to me? I must pay the vows I made to you, God. I will render thank offerings to you. For you have rescued my soul from death, my feet from stumbling, that I may walk before God in the light of life. This is the contemporary English version. It says, for the music leader, to the tune A Silent Dove in the Distance, a special psalm by David when the Philistines captured him in Gat, a prayer of trust in God. The words a prayer of trust in God are not in the psalm. They are like they're a heading that the translators gave to the psalm. Have pity, God Most High. My enemies chase me all day. Many of them are pursuing and attacking me, but even when I'm afraid, I keep on trusting you. I praise your promises. I trust you and am not afraid. No one can harm me. Enemies spend the whole day finding fault with me. All they think about is how to do me harm. They attack from ambush, watching my every step and hoping to kill me. They won't get away with these crimes, God, because when you get angry, you destroy people. You have kept record of my days of wandering. You have stored my tears in your bottle and counted each of them. When I pray, Lord God, my enemies will retreat, because I know for certain that you are with me. I praise your promises. I trust you and am not afraid. No one can harm me. I will keep my promises to you, my God, and bring you gifts. You protected me from death and kept me from stumbling, so that I would please you and follow the light that leads to life. So, first reactions, thoughts, feelings. What is the emotional nature of this psalm? Larry.
There's two occasions when I would pray this, and one is obvious. The second one is not obvious, but is, I think, even more important. The Psalm sort of acknowledges what life is like, and sometimes it really gets bad. And people are out to get you, and they resent you, they put you down, they lay traps for you, they're after you. And when that's happening and you're right in the middle of it, boy, is that a great time to recall this psalm for perspective. The time that's even more important is when you're feeling great, when things are going well, to suddenly recall this psalm and thank God for what you have done for me in the past. Thank you, Lord, for having saved me from that lightning bolt, from that car, from that random gunshot, from all the things that could have taken me out. Thank you, God, for sparing me. In fact, not even letting them be in my consciousness. So it's just a thankfulness every day for all the blessings you've received you don't even know about, you're not aware of, because God spared you completely from them.
Hmm, nice. Other thoughts? Alba.
Yeah, every night when I go to bed, I always say, thank you for dirt, water, air, and fire, and my mom and my ex-husband. And it's sort of like this, what Larry just said made me think of it, that there's all kinds of junk out there. But at the end of the day, I'm under my own roof and I'm in my own bed and I'm not hungry and I feel great. So there it is.
Yeah. So in our exploration of the last several psalms, we find that we've returned to sort of psalms that are connected to moments in David's life. Right? At the beginning of the book of Psalms, we had several of those, and then we moved on, and like the book of Psalms took a different turn for a while. But in the 50s, that is the Psalms 50, etc., we have returned to like thinking about these moments of David's life. And we talked about Doeg and we talked about Achitophel, right? We talked about these characters in David's story and the way that David feels differently upset when he's betrayed by an enemy or a stranger versus when he's betrayed by a friend. And we talked about the different moments of education that David is giving us, or that the psalmist is giving us through David's life story about what it means to look at enemies, right? Here, David is in the clutches of his most prominent enemies. That is to say, everybody knows, anybody who knows anything about the story of David knows that David is against the Philistines, right? David fights Goliath, and Goliath is the hero of the Philistine people, right? In order to win Saul's daughter uh, Michal's hand in marriage, David is asked to procure hundreds of Philistine foreskins which David doubles the amount that he's supposed to get and comes with a huge pile of foreskins. And uh we we know that David is so bloodied by the wars that he has with the Philistines that he is told by God, you will not build the temple. You will not build the house of God, right? Because David is constantly at war, and his wars are mostly with the Philistines. Oh, here we are we're we're getting in, the psalmist is trying to get into David's head in this moment where David is captured by the Philistines. One of our psalms translates and gives us the exact chapter and verse, 1 Samuel 21, right? But here, Larry said sometimes life gets really, really bad. That's the way of life. And indeed, in David's life, you could hardly find a time where it got worse than when he was in his, mortal enemies' uh, control. And in that moment, when it got really bad, or either David himself or the psalmist who imagines what David must have been thinking, the psalm imagines that when it gets really bad, when we're afraid, we turn to God. We put our trust in God because ultimately, what can people actually do to us? They can plot, they can lie in ambush, they can hope for my death. Maybe they can hurt me or torture me or even kill me. But God is keeping count of my wanderings. Ultimately, my essence, my soul, my being, I am because I am thought of by God. I had a English professor who had that on his wall. Descartes famously said, I think, therefore I am. And my English teacher had, I am thought of, right? Like I am thought of, therefore I am. That is to imply that that we are tears in God's flasks. We are entered into God's records, right? God thinks of us, and therefore we continue to exist. It's such a beautiful image, the tears and like this idea that when we cry, God collects our tears and holds them in jars in God's throne room. What do you think, Linda? Linda,
What
what do you think of this image of God collecting the tears?
what do I think of God selecting? Say it again.
God collecting the tears and keeping them in the flasks in God's throne room.
I haven't thought of God that way.
So beautiful. Martha,
Um, it gives me great comfort, I think, and somehow reminds me that God is not somehow this great detached other, um, but rather is, you know, so concerned with the minutia of my life in some way, and is deeply aware of my sufferings, because I know at times I I can start to feel like, okay, I think you lost my, I used to say this, God lost my file. That was the image I always had. I think my file dropped behind the desk, and and then other times, so I've gotten on a more whatever process, theology, whatever. I impact God as well as God impacting me. But sometimes I'll say, because I'm very good to say, gee, God, I think you could have organized that a little better. That really could have gone a little better. But now I'm also able to say, you know what? I just want to tell you, God, I think you did a really great job on that, you know? And it's all of that. So God really being very, very personally involved in my life. And in this case, with all my tsuris. And it interested me about how he wouldn't let David build the temple. And I thought to myself, but gee, God does all of the different sides of, well, and I thought, yeah, but that's God, not not human beings. And apparently David was too messed up by his engagement with violence. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think God, Jerusalem is the city of peace, right? God wants Solomon, Shlomo, the peaceful successor to David's violent uh wars. God wants the temple to be built by somebody who is known for a more peaceful approach. Yeah. It is an interesting aspect, right? Like here's David who really loves God. I mean, from the Psalms, we get this picture of a person. And I know we've talked about how maybe the Psalms were not actually written by David, but when we try to put together what David must have been like, the Psalms definitely are a part of it. They give us evidence for his character, or at least for the character that we read into the story, that we imagine. Yes, Larry.
You know, the putting the tears in your bottle and recording your tears, so forth, makes you also think that at the moment when you're so full of joy, part of it may be because you don't have to carry around your tears. God has them. You don't have to hang on to your sorrow. God,
Yeah. Or another way to think about it would be sometimes when we're really desperate, it's very, very hard to pray or to cry or to put our emotions into words or to try to connect. But it's okay because God has a storehouse of all of our tears. So if in this moment we can't bring ourselves to tears, that's okay. God won't count that against us because God has bottles and bottles of our tears. So that's the other side of it, I think, is that when you're joyous, you can be really joyous because God is the container for your sorrow and your despair. But also when you're despairing, you don't have to perform anything because God knows. God's got the bottles of tears stored up. God could just apply them to your accounting book, in this moment. Alba.
The Yeah, I'm on. Um, every time we talk about David, the Psalms seem to have this attitude about him. It's kind of like King Arthur meets Robin Hood, they kind of crash into each other. And you get this David, and he runs around, he goes here, he goes there, he's in the hills, he's next to a cave, he's Jonathan is, shooting arrows, and he's just, up to his knees in blood with the Philistines. It's sort of like, Robin Hood and the Sheriff of Nottingham or King Arthur and Mordred. I mean, they're like always kind of banging around. And verse 5, I love verse 5. All day long they twist my words, all their schemes are for my ruin. And he just seems, he's not like, he's more like he's pissed off. I say something and everybody's got to turn it on its head. And then I try and fix it and it just gets worse. So let me get my bow and arrow and let's go kill some Philistines. It's like this completely out of control guy. And but he's fun. He's a lot of fun. Here in Spain over the last 28 years that I've run this popsicle stand, I've been interviewed by a lot of people and a lot of, things. Never once, and I have tried so hard to say something succinct, 25 words or less, keep it focused. And it comes out, I don't know, Peter Rabbit and the carrot. It just like, I'm saying one thing, and whatever it is they're saying in the newspaper is like, who wrote this? I just, and I understand this feeling. I asked other people about this, other people who run synagogues, very tiny places, like in Asturias or in Barcelona or down in Sevilla. And they all say the same thing. After so much time, most of us just stop giving interviews. You want to interview me tomorrow? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm having my nails done. You just don't do it because for sure they're going to take it, twist it, and throw it in the air like confetti. Does that ever happen to you? Robbie Ruffy?
I try to be very careful about doing interviews, and
Oh
I just
yeah. It's like
it's
kiss of death.
yes.
Kiss of death. Yeah.
Um yeah, so it's interesting to me, like your the way that you are describing David as being like King Arthur or like Robin Hood, as opposed to saying these archetypal characters in English literature, like King Arthur and Robin Hood, have their roots in these biblical stories. And
Absolutely. For sure they have their roots in the biblical story. They were much, much later. They're nice and legendary. And so of course you want to have legendary characters in your own country shine with these kinds of go get 'em tiger kind of,
exactly.
attitude. And so of course it's that way.
Yeah.
I've always loved the Robin Hood myth and the King Arthur myth and
Oh
all the
yeah.
junk that goes on in between,
But the idea of a of a hero who robs from the rich to give to the poor, right? That is not unique to Robin Hood. That is a
Yeah.
story that is an ancient story. It's just that in our particular cultural context,
Mm.
we think of those stories as Robin Hood stories. Just like we might think about the rags to riches story of Cinderella as being a Cinderella story. Yeah. But of course, this is a cross-cultural story.
Right. But
Yeah.
they're of course, all of the legends and stuff. How many books were printed up until not so long ago? It was the Bible, and if you were hard up, the Bible. And so everybody just like read the Bible, and there's just so many wonderful stories in there. I used to work a billion years ago. I worked at Base Yaakov School for Girls, Educate a Girl, Educate a Family. And I did the afternoon shift for the secular stuff. And I remember hearing too the Frummy teachers from the morning who were on their way out as I was on the way in. One of them was saying that this particular group of girls, I think it was 8th grade or 9th grade, they were a little more rambunctious than others. And the other teacher was saying, take out Samuel, have them do Samuel. And Kings, those things, get a little bit of, get the blood moving. So that was cute. I always like those stories best.
Martha, did you have something you wanted to add?
Uh, no, no, I guess it just really strikes me how this person like David, as wildly powerful as he was in his day, how he has this very humble side about trusting in God, that he really has this personal connection, that he
Yeah,
yeah, that's
nice.
interesting.
So Rabbi Richard Levy translates it this way: for the conductor on the silent dove of distant places, for David a michtam, when the Philistines seized him in Gat. So on the silent dove of distant places, right? Some of the translations translated it as on Yonath Elem Rechokim, which I think is a great translation of the Hebrew. Several of them, all right, upon Yonat Elem Rechokim, on Yonat Elem Rechokim, even the King James version, to the chief musician upon Jonath Elem Rechokim, right? That is, this is. Can you translate this phrase? And it means something like the muted dove or the silent dove in the distance. And as you can see here, this says to the tune of, right? To the tune, a silent dove in the distance. Now, was this a tune, Yonat Elam Rechokim, that everybody just knew, right? And that they had written this poem got written and can be set to the same tune as that? Or was it a tune that was written for this psalm? I was thinking about how the previous psalm also mentioned a dove, and maybe there is a connection between the dove in Psalm 55 and the musical note to sing this psalm to the silent dove of distant places. And but what Rabbi Richard Levy says about it, he says the phrase suggests that, like other head notes, it designates a traditional melody to which this psalm was set. Certainly, these plaintive words, in which the dove perhaps cries out for succor, fits the tone of this psalm. Perhaps the melody was equally plaintive. One of the saddest parts, and we've talked about this before, about reading psalms today is that we don't have the musical history that accompanied them. Larry.
The silent dove concept is that even though there's a mournful tone here, it's distant or it's muted. And that brings to mind the other important issue in here is that you will take care of this, God. You will take your vengeance on them. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, and David is acknowledging it. And I think part of the reason he can do his peaceful side is because he doesn't feel he has to respond in vengeance to those who are after him continuously. God will take the account of it, and he'll repay. That may have been David's salvation from being a wild man.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Are they not in your counting? You'll take care of it, God. And that's one of the things that has happened to me. I used to feel that I had to take account of everything that happened to me. I didn't have that sense that God will take care of this. He can do it much better than I can. And he knows what they really need. Maybe they aren't such bad people. Who knows? But they're just acting crazy. God fix them.
Yeah.
It's a release to not feel responsible to right every wrong that's happened to you or others.
Yeah, to know that God is there keeping track.
He's got all the tears, everybody's tears in the bottle. He knows where they came from.
Yeah. Richard Levy also points out that we've found tear bottles from the ancient Near East. That this was actually a thing.
Really?
Before tissues, people collected tears in bottles. I mean, we also in English literature, we have examples of that. Uh,
Harry Potter.
right, where you have to go out and find the tear of a crocodile or the tear of a dragon or
Yeah.
uh a witch's tear, right? Like to collect a tear in a bottle is a powerful mystical story. And so this image it's connected to that, and apparently there is devices like that. Vials have been uncovered from the ancient Near East that were used to capture tears.
Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. At the end of Harry Potter, that's how he finds out that Snape was the true hero of Harry Potter. Harry Potter was just this thing moving around, but it was Snape, Professor Snape, who was the true hero of the whole book. And in the end, it's Snape and he tells Harry to take his tears. Sad. It's very sad. I'm looking for this thing.
Um, the Koren Tehillim picked up exactly where Larry started us, right? This time things are really bad. There's no exit. I'm scared to death. But God is near. I can pray to God. I can thank God, and through that process of sharing with God my fear, my acknowledging that it's really bad, maybe that will make a space for something to work out. So there are almost no uses of this psalm in the Jewish liturgical tradition, but interestingly, the only place that I could find this psalm paraphrased in a Jewish prayer is in a prayer that was written for a fast day that we no longer practice, or that most Jews no longer practice. Now, there are hundreds of these, hundreds of community fast days that were established by particular communities in Europe. So this one was instituted, the 20th of Sivan was instituted as a fast day by Rabbeinu Tam in the 12th century and commemorated a massacre at Blois in France, um, which was the first instance of a blood libel in continental Europe, where the Christian community of that town passed out the story that the Jewish community of that town had been um, killing Christian children to use their blood in ritual purposes, and which was a lie. And as a result of that story, the Christian community killed many of the members of the Jewish community. And Rabbeinu Tam was the leader of the French Jewish community. He didn't live in that town, but he was the leader of the French Jewish community. He instituted a public fast for the Jews of France at that time. And some broader some other Ashkenazi Jewish communities of Germany, etc., also fasted in honor of this moment. But what we know is that there were hundreds of these small communities that marked moments of desperation of their private community with fast days that lasted sometimes for hundreds of years, right? This fast was practiced from 1171 all the way until 1941, when the community that was practicing this fast was completely annihilated by the Nazis. And it is this idea that Jewish communities have historically marked terrible things that have happened to the Jewish community by fasting on the anniversary of that date, that leads some folks, including myself, to teach that Holocaust Remembrance Day should be honored as a fast day in the Jewish liturgical tradition, and that fast day poems should be written for that purpose, and we should use the traditional fast day liturgy. We are rapidly getting to the part of history where there will no longer be survivors who can give a firsthand account while candles are lit. And while the firsthand account and lighting of candles is a really beautiful way to mark Holocaust Remembrance Day, uh, the Jewish community has always marked these terrible occasions with a particular kind of liturgical stance. Here, uh, there are there are only one or two Hasidic factions who continue to observe the 20th of Sivan as a fast day. Uh, just a couple dozen people, and but their Siddur is available online. So when I was searching for this psalm in the Jewish liturgical tradition, I was able to find this prayer, which is an acrostic prayer, one verse for each letter of the alphabet, and written with this sense of the dread, the desperation of moments of deep communal sorrow. And it starts with this verse 4, which in our uh in our Psalter, in the book of Psalms, it doesn't start with an aleph. It says, Yom Ira ani elecha evtach. When I'm afraid, when a day of fear comes, I trust in you, God. The poet of this prayer re rewrote the sentence so that it starts with the word ani. It means almost the same thing. Ani Yom Ira and Yom Ira Ani means the same thing in Hebrew. Where you put the the person, what's it called in grammar? The subject.
Pronoun, subject.
Yeah, where you put the subject of the sentence matters less in Hebrew than it does in English. In English, subjects are supposed to come in a particular order, and it sounds weird if you do it otherwise. But in Hebrew, where you put the subject matters less. So, Yom Ira Ani Elecha is the same as Ani Yom Ira Elecha, and it points out how the alliterative power of the aleph in this phrase. In this day of dread, I call upon you. So,
Do you remember which Hasidic dynasty that was still.
that uses this. Yeah, I have that. I have that somewhere. Yeah, the Bells Hasidim.
Bell.
Yep, the Bells Hasidim. They're a Hasidic dynasty founded in the town of Belz in western Ukraine. And they still the Belzer Rebbe still says that you should say this prayer on the 20th of Sivan. There are some Belzer Hasidim in Israel. There, let's see. There are around 4,000 Belzer Hasidim in the world.
So they were in France before they moved to Bells.
I think actually they were founded in Belz. Uh and the date was close enough to an event in Belz that was that also happened a few hundred years later. Like basically, people were already fasting on this day, and so when other bad things happened that happened close enough to the 20th of Sivan, they got sort of swept up in it. And the Belzer Hasidim, I think, are actually remembering a different event.
I see.
The original source of that fast day was Rabbeinu Tam in the 12th century, uh, the with the blood libel in France. But the day also marks several other things. And in modern Israeli history, there are a couple of things that have happened in that also in that time period, the 20th of Sivan, that it has been suggested that this should also mark that in the modern Israeli period, but that hasn't caught on. So in the War of Independence, like the fall of Jerusalem, the was very close to the 20th of Sivan, and Jerusalem was um the eastern part of Jerusalem was evacuated, and ultimately was behind the Jordanian barbed wire, from 1949 to 1967. That happened also close to the 20th of Sivan. So that when I looked it up, that was one of the things that came up. I don't know exactly why the Belzer Hasidim continued to practice it. It's possible that they continue to practice it because of Rabbeinu Tam, because of the original 12th century thing. That was like a very Rabbeinu Tam was so widely respected as a Talmudist and leader that even though he was the leader of French Jewry, like most of the Ashkenazi Jewish world looked to Rabbeinu Tam during his lifetime for rulings. So it's possible that they're just following that original reason. All right, we'll close out with this passage from Rabbi Richard Levy, the spiritual applications. Verse 9 of this psalm states in lyrical imagery that the lives we lead are recorded by God in a book, as we learn on the high holy days, and in a vial of tears, in which God preserves our sorrows and perhaps mingles them with God's own. In times of sorrow, it can be helpful to think that the tears we shed are not just wiped away by us, but are preserved in the throne room of the Holy One, who looks at them, we like to think, and remembers how much work God has to bring the world to perfection and empty the bottles of tears. the verses in which the Aleph of God's name permeates every word, and other verses in which the pervasive Aleph is the reminder of Ani, the I of each of us, are important on days when we feel distant from God. Just as the Aleph is silent, so God's presence is silent, and the Ani of each of us mingles quietly with the Anochi, as in Anochi Adonai Elohecha, I am Adonai your God, the first of the Ten Commandments, the Anochi of God. When we trust in God, even when we feel most pursued by destructive forces, we too need not fear. We too need not halt, but can go on to realize God's will and our own destinies in the world.
Mm-mm.
All right.
May I ask something that has nothing to do with anything?
Yeah, let me just close
It's
out
quick
our
because
close out
either
our
you can
recording.
remember you can remember the information or not. There's a book I use just to kind of like guide me along.